Welcome back to the Dryline Podcast, OKC's purveyor of culture. Weekly conversations about our mercurial weather, sacred sports, nefarious politics, and on the whole, damn fine people. I'm your host, Ryan Fightmaster, managing editor of the Dryline. Yesterday, we published my article titled, "Can Oklahoma Still Elect a Reasonable Governor?" I was curious because we hadn't had a reasonable governor in office since Brad Henry in 2011, and this runoff election was the best opportunity our state had had in years. Why? Mainly because of Gentner Drummond, former combat pilot, acting attorney general, seemingly a pretty normal guy. And for today's standard in politics, particularly in Oklahoma, he's relatively moderate. Because if a person like Drummond yesterday couldn't get elected, given Trump's tanking approval rating, failures to reduce inflation or end wars, plus Governor Stitt's high-profile alleged corruptions inside his executive branch, and on the heels of Ryan Walter's ouster after embarrassing the state far and wide, and add in the unlikability of Mike Mazzei as a candidate, and the flip-flop on the whole Enola smelter project and everything that went into that. When would a candidate like Gentner Drummond ever get elected, if not now, in this moment? Well, Mazzei won, and it appears, though not overwhelmingly, that the endorsement Mazzei received, in air quotes there, from Donald Trump really mattered. In the Oklahoman today, they mentioned a statistic that Trump still carries a 74% approval rating within our state's registered Republicans. But they also mentioned that in the counties where Trump had an outsized margin of approval rating, Drummond and Mazzei didn't really differ much in the vote count. Instead of it being a 100-pound dumbbell on the scale of the election, Trump's endorsement ended up being a few pennies, and that's all that mattered. 2,020 votes was the difference. Statewide. That is 26 votes per county. What was interesting in watching those final votes come in last night, votes from Oklahoma and Tulsa County per KOCO was who I was watching. More left-leaning and moderate counties, that being Oklahoma and Tulsa County, I would expect them to lean more towards Drummond, but what was remarkable was how those votes maintained Mazzei's lead, even widened his lead at some point. Honestly, I was really surprised by Oklahoma, Cleveland, and Tulsa County. Mazzei competed really well there, which, to me, shows that Trump still has pull in the big city suburbs. All right, so before we get into what Mazzei's victory means for Oklahomans and what Drummond could have probably done differently during his campaign, I want to get into what a lot of people have been talking about around the runoff. Closed primaries. So, Oklahoma is one of 13 states with closed primaries. Yesterday, only registered Republicans could vote in the Mazzei-Drummond runoff. I'm an independent, so all I got to vote on was the state questions. Would Drummond have won if independents were allowed to participate yesterday? Yes, for sure. If Democrats were allowed to participate, this would have been a landslide. Does this kind of suck? Sure, it does. Because of basically how hard our state bleeds red, that the registered Republicans hold all the cards in all the elections, even at the primary level. Oh, but okay, hold on. Wait a second. I got some numbers for you that are actually insane. So I looked up the voter registration of Oklahomans across the whole state because I just wanted to see, what the actual split was. And I expected it to be like 55. I don't know what I expected. I think I expected like 40% Republican, 30% Democrat, and like 20% independent or something. I don't even know if that adds up to the right number. But all right, so what it actually showed was that 53% of Oklahomans are registered Republicans. That is an insanely high number. Okay, because only 25% of the Oklahomans are registered Democrats. 20% are independents. There are almost more independents registered to vote in this state than Democrats, which basically means a couple things. First, in statewide elections, without even having to convince any independents to vote for their candidates, Republicans should easily win statewide elections because of their margin and because of just their advantages on the aggregate. And that's why yesterday was so important and why Cindy Munson and Mike Mazzei's general election in November will be such a landslide. The numbers are simply too big a hurdle for anyone except Republicans in statewide elections, not elections for seats in like Cleveland, Oklahoma, or Tulsa County, where the factions are more even. But that's why that runoff yesterday was such a big deal, was because if you get a Republican into a statewide election, they're going to win in Oklahoma. I think the second thing that those numbers tell you is that the Democratic Party has given up on trying to persuade Oklahomans to be Democrats. It also just shows that the Democratic Party has not had a message that has resonated with very many people. I mean, sure, I get farmers, I get rurally, like those places have swung on the populist swing towards Trump, and that's been a nationwide trend. But I would have thought that like in the cities where the bulk of our population sits, that there would be more registered Democrats just because, it was only 2011 that Brad Henry was a Democratic governor in the state of Oklahoma. That's not the case. I just think there has not been anything the Democratic Party is selling that the state of Oklahoma is interested in. I don't really find that surprising either, because most of the talking points that have come out of the Democratic Party in the last couple of years have just not been of any interest and honestly have been quite scary to the majority of Oklahomans, and that reflects on how people are registered to vote. I don't know, man. It's crazy. And I think it sets up how that was able to happen yesterday, how Mazzei was able to win whenever Drummond was such a reasonable candidate, but we're going to get to that more. But you know what? I'm going to say it. This is going to be like an unpopular thing to say. I think I understand close primaries. It's not fair, ultimately in the big picture, but it's definitely fair to the parties. If people aren't registered for your party, why should they get to call the shots on the people that your party puts forth? This would be like the Rockets fans getting to vote on whether we decide to give Shea the Supermax or not. I wouldn't want that because I'm a Thunder fan, and I hate Rockets fans. So yeah, close primaries suck, but they're understandable. I don't know. I don't think it's that big of an indictment on our election process that we have close primaries. I mean, I think it just kind of makes sense, but does it suck? Sure. But just in case you were holding out hope that Democrats are this shining beacon of hope and that Democrats have open primaries, that's not the case. Because this year, the Democrats also did not vote or put the petition forth to the state government to open up their primaries. They had a chance. They also did not do it. I read some reporting on this in the Oklahoman that was hilarious. It might have been Oklahoma Voice, actually. But so they missed the deadline and to put forth open primaries. And some leader in the Democratic Party put out some press release that said, we really tried to open up primaries. And again, this might have even been Gentner Drummond that replied back to this, but there was somebody in the state legislature that was yo, we have a formal process for accepting the petition to open up a party's primaries, and you all missed the deadline. You weren't even close. You didn't even start the application. So it's all just theater. Both primaries want the power. They want as much control as they can get. And why would they give it up? They get to select, like Trump did yesterday with Mazzei. And also, guess who weighed in on this Mazzei-Drummond election just 3 days ago? The chair of the Oklahoman Republican Party State Committee, an important committee, given 53% of the state is registered Republicans. The chair, Charity Lynch, cannot make up a more fitting name for a person in their position than that. Can you? I mean, let's just pause, appreciate Charity Lynch. So Lynch endorsed Mazzei, something that has essentially never been done before, where the committee, again, previously and its predecessors had usually stood neutral inside of their own primaries and not commented or done any endorsements. But she felt the need to step in and do what was best for her state and, quote, support a real patriot. She's referring to Mike Mazzei. Keep in mind, by the way, that Gentner Drummond is a combat fighter pilot who actually served in the armed forces, okay? Mike Mazzei, he is an investor. He manages funds, all right? But, hey, got to step in and support a real patriot. So, Lynch is also the same person who told the Oklahoman earlier this month, and this is a real quote, "We're going to be headed into communism if we don't have someone standing strong for our values." And that's part of the role of the party. She's referencing her own role in the party. But, hey, as Roger Stone says, politics is about winning. And yesterday, Stitt, Trump, Mazzei, Roger Stone, they won. And they notched another win for the closed primary system. Okay, I have a question for you. If you're an independent, or a Democrat for that matter, and these Republican primary elections essentially install our state's leadership, why aren't you going out today and switching your registration to Republican? You can still vote for Democrats in the general election. If your absence from the Democratic primary ends up leading to more radical and progressive candidates getting through, don't worry. They're probably going to get beat in the general election anyway by the 53% of registered Republicans. Gosh, man, I hate how I sound right now, but they're playing hardball with us. And we, the electorate, might just have to start playing some hardball too. I'm considering it. Really. I know. I hate how this sounds. But 2020 votes, folks. 2020 votes was the difference yesterday. That was it. So, hey, what do we got to do to have a say in who becomes our governor? But all I wanted was to not be embarrassed by our next governor. All I wanted was the clips that get circulated around the internet to not be viral for how absolutely asinine our publicly our public facing leaders are. That's all I wanted. But hey, we'll get to try again. We will get to try again. Okay, so let's talk about what the Drummond campaign could have done differently here. This runoff, I think, and for reasons you might not think, came down to Trump, obviously. I wrote about this extensively in the Dryline article, which I will link in the show notes, but I can't imagine that Drummond didn't have a good chance to get Trump's endorsement. He was the better candidate. He had a $6 million fundraising advantage over Mazzei. He also had significant support, basically from every power player in the state outside of Stitt. Clay Bennett, the Loves, Switzer, a who's who of Oklahoma Kingmakers. They even got a profile into 405 magazine of Reed Drummond, Gentner Drummond's cousin-in-law, this month. I mean, that's some pretty suave timing to get that in right now. But yeah, they basically had the Kingmakers in line behind them. Plus, Trump, historically, wants to side with a winner, always, But, I mean, I gotta say, though, his candidates recently, over the last couple of months, his endorsed candidates for governor have lost 6 times recently. And in pretty conservative states like South Carolina, Georgia, Wyoming. So, yeah. Hey, I don't know. I feel like that indicates something, which I'll get into in a bit. People talk about the payment that Mazzei made to Roger Stone, the $67,000 payment for Roger Stone's political strategy advice. And the way they talk about it, it's basically seen that it was like a comeuppance to get the nod from Trump, like a pay-to-play kind of thing. And maybe it really is that simple. There was a Wall Street Journal article reported a few weeks back that Trump has this whole apparatus set up to essentially extort everyone around him for money, and in turn, he'll offer less regulation on their businesses. But, yeah, neither here nor there. I mean, here. His campaign would have known, though, that it would assuredly, this is like Drummond, I'm talking about Drummond now. Drummond's campaign would have known that it was going to assuredly tip the runoff in their favor if they would have got that endorsement. So my question is, why didn't they get it? Why didn't they just go get the endorsement? I've been asking myself this, and I was asking it last night as I was watching his concession speech. Like, what prevented them from going out and getting the thing that they knew would have got them the election? You know? And that's also the same question I'm going to be asking myself as Mazzei rolls out whatever the hell he's going to roll out across his time as governor. What promise did Mazzei make that Drummond wasn't willing to promise? Was it just the Enola smelter support? I know it's a big deal, maybe the biggest issue in the election, but it had to have been more than that, right? And I think Mazzei will be a puppet for his entire tenure in office, doing whatever Trump wants. Similar to Stitt, maybe even worse than Stitt on that front. But Trump's also only going to be in office now for, 2 more years? So, who knows? But I was watching Mazzei's acceptance speech, I guess like his winning speech. And he started it by thanking, quote, the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. Then he immediately thanked Donald Trump for giving him the win. What do you all think that's going to mean over the next couple of years? You know? I don't know. We're going to see. I talked about this too in the article, but looking back, don't you think Drummond's attacks on Mazzei were kind of quaint? Almost cute. Like every time he said Muslim monarchy, it never really sounded natural. It sounded forced, like he'd just been told to say it as many times as he possibly could by some political advisor in his ear. In his concession speech, you can just feel how much Drummond wanted to run a campaign with integrity and how proud he was to have run a campaign with integrity. And it seems like he did, for the most part. But I think he could have still ran an ethical campaign while also roasting Mazzei more. It sounds counterintuitive in a state where Republicans still have a 74% approval rating of Donald Trump. But what if Drummond would have just thrown any association with Trump out the door and just hammered Mazzei on his affiliation with Trump? Did Drummond's picture, the first picture on his website of him and Trump together, really persuade the MAGA crowd that he was MAGA? No chance. Every ad Mazzei ran, every billboard was an ad that included the words, endorsed by President Donald J. Trump. Drummond should have taken that personally and lambasted them, both, on the war, on Stitt's affiliations with Trump, Mazzei's affiliation with Stitt's, on gas prices, whatever, on how Trump is willing to sell the community of Enola down the river to strike a deal with the UAE. You're telling me, if he wouldn't have stood high on that ground and blasted Mazzei just selling our state out to Trump all day long, everywhere he went, that it wouldn't have helped him more in trying to that it wouldn't have helped him more than riding the fence? We're talking about 2,000 votes here. I mean, he was close to winning. I mean, it almost worked, but it didn't. I think this would have helped. I think that would have resonated with people because I do feel like there is some doubt in the back of MAGA supporters' minds for the first time. I mean, I have friends who have been ardent MAGA supporters for years who are now questioning Trump, who voted for Drummond in this election. It's I don't know. I feel like Drummond just could have been more savage while still maintaining his ethics, but it would have required him to really turn his back on the Trump nomination or the lack of his Trump endorsement. But instead, I think he tried to ride the fence and keep himself loosely associated with Trump. I just don't think it did him any service. He also should have never said anything that was as moderate as some of the stuff that he was saying. There were some of his comments across this entire run-up that opened him up for easy shots across the bow from Mazzei. The independents probably thought all this reasonability was awesome. But all the MAGA people, all the Trump, faith, family, and patriot people did not find those comments awesome. They probably thought it made him sound like a big city communist or however Charity Lynch would describe him. Oh, gosh, man. I don't know. Another thing, his campaign felt kind of John McCain-ish, combat vet, great track record, integrity, public servant, all that stuff that used to really matter before social media and back when people used to actually read. You got to give a lot of credit to Mazzei and his people for just having a better understanding of how this whole politics thing works now. People don't really go back and connect the dots about what people say or what people do or what people did or who people are. They follow the epithets, and if you scream, Drummond is a rhino for long enough and fiercely enough, you win elections. They attach themselves to Trump's cult of personality, which in Oklahoma was the winning strategy. Mazzei was Trump. Drummond was not Trump, essentially a communist, as we've established. And Mazzei won with a massive deficit in funding. $6 million gap that Trump endorsement made up. Whew, barely, which makes me wonder, how much more gas does this whole populism thing have, at least like nationally and even locally, because Oklahoma has to be, if not the strongest of Trump's strongholds, pretty damn close to the strongest. And Oklahoma, our state, almost just elected a moderate governor. That in itself says something more than just looking at Trump's 74% approval rating here with Republicans. I feel like it does say something. And whatever it says is not going to change the fact that Mazzei will more than likely, with all due respect to Cindy Munson, be our next governor. But it shows that something's moving in the direction of reasonability and that Trump's magic is starting to weaken a little bit here. Nationally, definitely is. National approval rating for Trump right now is sitting at like 35%. Again, in Oklahoma, his approval rating across all of the electorate is 50%. So we stand 15 percentage points more positive than the national average right now. If you get a second, this is kind of closing thoughts here. If you get a second, check out Drummond's concession speech. I watched part of it last night, like the first half of it, and I thought it was pretty awesome. All I could think was, that guy could have been our governor. I'll link it in the show notes. Man. Well, let's keep our heads up, everybody. Reasonability in this state. One day, I hope. I will not stop believing, actually. It's coming. Embarrassment will not have to be our future. I think it can happen. One day. If you enjoyed today's show, give us a follow on social media at DrylineOKC. Also, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you don't miss future episodes and interviews. If you want to read our writing, go on to Substack, type in the Dryline. You can find us there. We got a good interview lined up that should be happening here in the next 2 weeks. It is politically affiliated, so it's going to be fun. Another moderate, reasonable person that I'm excited to talk to and that we'll be rooting for. Also, those reviews you've been dropping into Apple Podcasts and Spotify are much appreciated. Thank you. Until next week, you'll know where to find us at the Powerhouse. Oh, Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plains. Oh, God.